Hi, it's Joe Mazumdar with Exploration Insights at the Metals Investor Forum in downtown Vancouver. And with me, I've got CEO Scott Williamson of Blackstone Minerals, an ASX-listed company that's looking at nickel in Vietnam. So, Scott, I guess just on the nickel market, I mean, that's taken off a bit. What's propelling that?
Yeah, so the current sort of run-up in the nickel price is being driven by the stainless steel industry. And obviously this ban in Indonesia. So the Indonesians are saying that you can't ship a non-processed ore. And that sort of, I suppose, led to a bit of speculation that there might not be enough nickel for the stainless market. The interesting thing is that we're sort of in nickel, not so much for this short-term sort of spike, but more about the medium to long-term, which has been driven by the lithium-ion battery industry. So at the moment, only 5% of nickel goes into batteries. And so most of that current run-up is stainless steel. But we think that over the medium to long term, that it'll be batteries that could really re-rate the nickel price.
And you were talking in your presentation, about the evolution of the battery, that you were talking in terms of ratios of nickel to manganese to cobalt. And now you're going to batteries that are more intense into like your 811, where there's 8 parts nickel now.
Yeah, so it's all about the energy density of the battery and the ability for the electric vehicle to have long range. So it's driving them towards more nickel, and obviously the cobalt is a lot more difficult to source, and the difficulties around sourcing cobalt have sort of moved them towards nickel and lowering the cobalt. So yeah, it was actually those battery end users that said to us about 12 months ago now, by the way, can you start looking for nickel? And that's where we landed on this asset in Vietnam, right on their doorstep.
So, I mean, people have been coming, like LG Chem and other battery manufacturers, into Vietnam to make batteries for scooters and for vehicles. And then they find out there's a nickel deposit there. So how did that work for you?
Yeah, it's really interesting because LG and Samsung and a lot of these electronics manufacturers have been in northern Vietnam for probably 20 years now.
For the cheap labor, the cheap power.
Manufacturing, one of the best manufacturing jurisdictions in the world. And that's why they decided, great place to build a battery plant. And they didn't actually realise that there's nickel all through the Vietnam, the belt we're in. So yeah, it was interesting because we'd already started establishing those relationships on the cobalt side when we were looking for cobalt in Canada. And then we actually took the nickel mine to them and said, oh, by the way, there's this great nickel mine down the road from your battery plant, and obviously, yeah, they're very keen to talk on how we can work together on potentially downstream processing and building a product that can move into that battery market. So looking at a nickel sulfate, which is the battery chemical version of nickel that can then go into the cathode, into the battery. So yeah, it's a great scenario where we've got low labour costs, low power. It's a great jurisdiction to be building anything, and particularly batteries. Yeah.
So background, this project that you have, Khoa, had a mine on it that failed. So why, I guess, for somebody from outside, what are you going to do different than what they did?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it failed. They failed to explore. So what they did is they mined the first ore body. They got to the bottom of the mine and they didn't do any further exploration. So they failed to do the proper geology and the science, which we're good at. And they, unfortunately for them, a lot of their profit went to the government in the way of a tariff on concentrate. So the Vietnamese government is very similar to Indonesia. They're saying, well, you as miners, you need to be building downstream facilities, otherwise you'll pay a 20% tariff. So the previous owners paid that tariff. Our plan is to remove that tariff by building a downstream facility, but we'll use one of these battery end users to help fund that and help us with that technical skill set that is required to build a nickel sulfate.
So how is the government helping you, or are they helping you in terms of advancing your project?
Yeah, so the government's very, I suppose, incentivising foreign investment, and that's what they've done in the manufacturing industry. We'll now see that move into the primary industries. We've got a very strong relationship from the previous owners around that provincial government. So the Son La province, we've got very low power costs. We've got the hydropower. the Sonla province, they're very keen to get this mine up and running because they know that it pays very good taxes. So as Westerners,
And there's a high unemployment rate. There's
yeah,
a lot of
it's a
development
very, I suppose, emerging province, and it really needs some industry. And this is a province that's built on agriculture and primary industries. So they're really keen to get the mine back up and running, create jobs, so the very supportive provincial government, and at the central level, there's this real push towards downstream, which is fine because that's the way we're going to do what they're incentivising to do, and that's the downstream facility.
So right now you've got a market cap of around 30 million Australian, and you did a private placement, and now you're cashed up. So what catalysts could an investor expect from Blackstone?
Yeah, so we're cashed up. So we raised 4.5 million at 15 cents. Unfortunately, the nickel price sort of fell away, and we were underwater for a little while. We've now made this King Cobra discovery. The market's starting to re-rate. So from that raising, we can deliver a scoping study and a maiden resource. This King Cobra discovery may delay that resource slightly because we were very close to almost finishing the drill out phase, and now we've struck this very high grade shallow King Cobra zone, which is potentially the feeder zone, which could take us towards the source of all the mineralisation. So that will take a little bit longer, but we're still within the next quarter. So Q2 we'll have a maiden resource and then a scoping study to follow up, and that'll include the downstream processing. So well funded all the way through to that scoping study, and then I think the market starts to re-rate just on the MPVs and the maiden resource. At least at the moment, the market can't really throw any numbers around what we've got. They know that there's $130 million of capital sunk, but they don't really understand what's left in the ground. We think there's a significant MPV on this project, and we'll show that in the scoping study in 6 months.
Okay, but you were showing also in your presentation how inexpensive it is to drill. Like, how many rigs do you have going right now?
Yeah, so we've actually bought a couple of drill rigs, and it's very cheap to buy rigs. It's very cheap to operate rigs. We've got 4 rigs at the moment. We've got 2 contractor rigs. They cost about $80 a metre. We've got 2 of our own rigs, diamond drill rigs, and they'll drill all the way down to 1 kilometre. Our 2 rigs are a bit shallower, so they're a bit smaller. They'll drill to about 300 metres, and they're $60 a metre. So I said in the presentation, when we were drilling in the snow in BC, it was about $500 a metre. So we've got basically 4 rigs for the price of 1. So it's been great.
Okay, so now going forward, you got these 2 major catalysts coming in the next 6 months?
Yes.
Right, and then from there, you've also doing negotiating, I guess, a high-level memorandum of understanding with these downstream people.
So with that scoping study, we then can really nut out a proper formal arrangement where we can say, well, let's partner on this downstream facility. We'll work out who wants to own it, what, and how that partnership works. But let's say we partner on that and we share the funding, or they may want to help fund the whole lot. So that scoping study puts some numbers around it and then allows us to really flush out what that partnership looks like, and we can move that to a formal arrangement and offtake and all that partnership will bring. Okay, great. Exciting news flow to come from Blackstone Minerals. CEO Scott Williamson. It's Joe Mazumdar, Exploration Insights, coming to you from the Metals Investing Forum in downtown Vancouver. Thank you for watching.